Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
Hi, my name's Erik Larson. This is my son Gunnar Larson. We've done the Battle of Suursaari Island in 1942. It was a Finnish island that was taken by the Soviets during the Winter War in 1940. And once the Baltic Ocean froze over, the Finns skied across it and retook the island. It was with BrickFair's theme, this being water this year, we focused on 2 water builds. So this is one of them. We wanted to do the frozen Baltic Ocean and simulate the ice. There was an iconic lighthouse on the island called Lounatriivi Lighthouse. And there was a last stand for the Soviets where they charged out the lighthouse and tried to make it across the ice back to Russian lines. But the Finns intercepted and ended up taking them out at the steps of the lighthouse. So that's what we've simulated here.
You've got the Finnish soldiers over here and then the Soviets kind of exiting the lighthouse?
Absolutely. It was a large operation. The Finns had to bring in across the ice, pulled by horses and sleds, all the equipment they needed to fight. They blacked out all the lights. They had a snowstorm before, which I've tried to simulate there. And it was a pretty difficult operation to get the element of surprise on the Soviets. So it was pretty effective, and they ended up clearing the entire island. They came from both sides at the southern tip. This side came over land, and the other forces on the other side skied over the ice by the sunken freighter.
And that's all fantastic. The landscaping is wonderful. So take us through some of that and kind of how you do that, because there's a lot of white here, so you have to figure out how to work with that.
Yeah, I like the contrast to the red lighthouse, which is the actual color of the lighthouse, which still exists, with the white. It really kind of pops for me. I wanted to do the ice heaving on the edge, so I greeb it a little bit there and then use the slopes to simulate the effect of the ground coming back off the ocean. The bushes, I saw a really good effect that I saw people using on Instagram, are actually woven together, pieces that are woven together and just stacked. It creates a very effective bush, particularly with a winter bush covered in snow. So that's one of the techniques I wanted to use on the island. And then I was really trying to improve my trees from the Mannerheim line mock that we showed last year. So I end up coming up with a technique where you take the pins and the trees are completely mobile. So you just take the hinge plates and you can move the tree branches up and down, side to side, and create any kind of feel you want. When you're doing trees all together kind of in mass, it's a very effective technique to recreate that.
So I also like the use of kind of the 1x1 round tiles there to create this snow that's kind of, part of the leaf is covered, part isn't.
Absolutely. It's just the effect of more snow, and it gives a better effect than just seeing the open circles. I agree. A lot of people have mentioned that they like that. A lot of talk about people building winter villages and using those trees, so I've explained them throughout the show quite a bit.
So that takes us to the lighthouse now, which I would say is the centerpiece of this, just incredibly detailed.
It is. So it lights up for World of Lights, obviously. All of our mocks always light up because that's part of the best part of the show. So I'll take the top of the lighthouse off, which holds the battery pack, and kind of show you how we built the interior. So that would hold the actual light and the light box. And then we ended up getting the effect for the circular by using the Lego wagon wheel and just alternating, getting slower or smaller or larger using the circles, and just creating the effect of uneven brickwork, being able to go slope and come back up, which was a difficult technique to do. So I think it's very effective, and it simulates the brickwork on the lighthouse very well.
So if you wanted these layers of brick to stick out further, you would just kind of add like maybe a little stud piece in there.
Absolutely. So at the bottom it's 2, and I added the plates, or the plates in there, and just made it go further back and forth. So you see this one is wider than the one below it. It's got one extra plate, so it creates the effect of the brickwork very well, I believe.
And then clipping them onto that center wheel piece works fantastic there. So has this stayed together pretty well for you?
Stayed together, yeah. I just run the Technic rods down through the center, and then inside the spokes, once it got here, to really create stability, because people do tend to reach out and touch sometimes, but it's weathered the storm.
And then underneath that, you've got kind of the gray brick section, which looks like you have a ton of pieces packed in there.
A ton of 1x2s and 1x1s to kind of give that effect of brickwork, because it was a very odd shape, so we had to use the cheese slopes to make the effective angles in there. Inside, obviously, there's not a staircase, but in the bottom it is an interior with the spiral staircase that goes up that simulates what the bottom of the lighthouse looked like.
I also like the use of these garage door elements to create the round tower there.
I took that from Lego, I got to be honest. Their lighthouse had an ingenious technique to create the effect that the lens was in, and so we did take that. That was a Lego build technique from their lighthouse kit. Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. So then that takes us kind of down here, and you mentioned this was a sunken ship here in the ice?
Yeah, so there's something that the Soviets had, what was called the Soviet Dunkirk. When the German troops surrounded Tallinn, all 190 ships had to break out of the harbor to try and make it back to Kronstadt, and they end up hitting a minefield. And many ships were beached on this island. It was the closest island, so that was the sunken freighter that they couldn't lift, so they filled it with coal, and the Soviets used the ship to refill. So it's very interesting in photos from World War II. If you look at Sorosari Island, you can actually see this sunken ship in about the position in relation to this ice house. So I thought it was an interesting detail to create a transition between the two mocks. Yep.
And what were some of the design elements of the ship there that you were trying to capture?
I was trying to capture the hold of the freighter. The freighter is actually 3 times longer than this in 1/40th scale, so I could just do the back half of it, and I wanted to get the angle and where it had actually hit the mine in the sides, kind of get the people to feel that that's a frozen, sunken ship, kind of what I was going with it. So, and then of course, if last year this was what we used to do the ballast for the train, so a lot of this is just reused from our past mocks to create something new to offer people to see. So, yep.
So sticking with the water theme, we transition into a slightly different scene. Tell us what we have happening down this side of the table.
All right, so this is also Sorosari Island, but in the northern side it's Sorakila, which was the town that was on the island. It was a casino and kind of a fishing village. The Germans, once Finland wanted to pull out of the war in 1944, the Germans knew that they needed to get the island because it was a key to the minefields in the Baltic. So they, all the Finns were supposed to get, the Germans were supposed to get the Finns were supposed to get the Germans out of Finland by September 15th, 1944, and there was 15 Germans on this island, and the Finns brought in a couple boats and said, we'll get them off the island, we'll bring them back to German base, and the Germans said, no, we'll come pick them up. So they arrived in a round boat, told the Finns they were going to actually take the island for themselves. The Finns were in a difficult position because the Soviets had said if that happened, the Soviet Union would invade Finland. So the Finns were forced to fight against the Germans on this island in this battle. So the Germans hadn't expected the harbor to be so full, so they were slow in attacking, and they had to send the stern boats in here. So I wanted to show the effect of the water being out in the actual Baltic versus behind the breakwater. So we used the Lego net technique to make the waves that people are pretty familiar with, trying to get that actual break so that you can make the actual wave. I know I've seen people do motors under it, but with the black under it, and you can contour it with different colored bricks on top, and then with lights it looks very nice. If you're going to do a motor, you should use blue though, because it does show through. It's a little bit better effect if you use blue when you do a motor underneath it, but that's a very interesting effect to create the actual water, I believe.
Yeah, it creates just a really lifelike kind of look there, and then you combine that with the clear cheese slopes to give the wake idea.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people have commented on that. So we had to recreate all the boats. These aren't boats that are very common, but I like to be very historically accurate. So that's a German round boat, which is a minesweeper. It's R249, which I had never seen modeled anywhere else. So I had to get the actual plans and specs, and I created it in 1/40th, the closest I could to what we actually had. And I learned all about minesweeping, which I had no idea while I was doing that. So that was the boat the Germans initially invaded on. And then I have 2 Finnish VMV motor torpedo boats. The Finns only made a few of them. There was one in a museum in Finland, so I copied the actual model that still exists, and I saw the armament that was on it during the war. So my son built all the equipment, all the men, and he helped in that aspect of it. And then he lights all the mocks too. So you see the lights that are actually in there as well. That looks great on the World of Lights. The breakwater exists still today. It was kind of that weird shape, so we set that on top of that water to get the effect of the turn with hinge plates. The Porkala was a Finnish liaison ship, so they didn't have any model of that. It was a one of a kind, so the Maritime Museum actually gave us the plans for that, and then we built the entire inside exactly how it was during the war. There's a spot for a battery box in the middle as well, so that powers the entire inside of the ship with lights also. So a lot of different shipbuilding, which takes us back to our roots with the submarine 2 years ago, and that's a lot of recycling too. This is all the dock, the sub pin from 2 years ago that we recycled in to make the breakwater. So a little bit of reusing pieces as well.
That's the way to do it. That's fantastic. And I love that you took the time and effort to even do interiors on some of these ships. That's such a great level of detail.
It makes Lego fun too, just to do that, a little bit of research and the playability of actually doing stuff with it for my son and I is a very fun aspect of it as well, yeah.
So as we move closer to the buildings, what do we have?
So as they worked their way down the dock, there was the actual White House that they negotiated the surrender in. I wanted to model that because that was the dockmaster's house that was actually there. It was all destroyed in the day of fighting. Nothing was left. The boats were sunk, and the Porkala remained, but the other boats are sunk in the harbor. It was a fishing village, so we simulated the dock and the wharf that was there. the Finns had a hydrophone station on the island that they used to listen to Soviet submarines. So they had the tug Taipale in there and a cable laying ship, and they were removing the hydrophone station at the time the Germans attacked. So I knew we wanted to include both those ships in the build. And then the last minute we decided we need a village. So a couple weeks ago we put together a couple of the buildings that would have been in Surikila village and simulated the buildings that they had there at the time. So the Finns basically pulled back into the mountains once they saw the Germans attacking, but we simulated a little bit of the initial defense of the island.
So you've got some nice buildings here, kind of unique roofs and different variations here as well.
Yeah, there was thatched roofs, so we had to figure out how to do the thatched roofs and a little bit different roofing techniques. And because it was a little late, we didn't do as intensive interiors as we normally do, but we definitely wanted to model the village and did different building techniques to create different looking wartime 40s era Finnish buildings.
All of this looks fantastic, as well as your landscape, and even the water itself here is really nice. So is that all just on kind of base plates, or what do you have there?
Correct. So it's a base plate, a regular Lego base plate with black underneath it, and then the dark green to kind of give a little bit of coloring to it, and then the higher studs to simulate water. And when you light it, the light actually reflects off these, and it's a very nice technique. It's worth the time to actually do if you know you're going to light a mock that has that translucent blue. It shows up really well.
And with all these different boats here, that's not always an easy thing to build out of Lego. So what was your approach to some of the different kind of hull shapes and sizes here?
That was the absolute hardest thing I've done, is to try and recreate the rounded hull of Lego ships. So the plates inside I use to kind of angle it, but it does create a little bit of gaps, but you have to make those difficult front angles with Lego. And this was a rounded ship, so you could see its curves and different plates used with hinge tiles to try and create the curves. And then the tube technique, which is I see people using a lot. There's a tube with clips on it that creates that curve. It puts a little bit of stress, but it creates a nice back of a boat. And anybody boat builders out there, they know my pain. Those are hard to do. So I always look at every hull I see to see the techniques that are used, because it's a difficult job in Lego for sure.
This is fantastic, and I love your approach. You know, last year we saw some of your work, and this year kind of building something not the normal World War II scenes, going to some different material. What is the research process like for these battles?
Yeah, the research is probably as long as the builds, because it's not historically known. It's not like D-Day or Stalingrad or some of the major battles, so you really have to go in and dig into the archives, and with the boats, just ask questions, search a little bit deeper, and to recreate things historically accurate is half of the battle, and it's part of the fun as well, learning as you go along. And with my son and I working together, it's a fun activity for us to both do.
Excellent work. Thank you so much for bringing this all out to BrickFair here. I love all the level of detail with this landscaping, the interiors, and everything you've done here. So can't wait to see what you have for us in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.